Welcome back to Married to English. I'm Jeremy, and today we have an amazing guest, Lauren Call.
We spend so much time thinking about what other people think about us when all they're doing is thinking about what we think about them.
She's an actress, a film producer, and a mother who has overcome imposter syndrome. Today, she's going to be sharing with you her tips on resilience and sticking with your goals. If you have ever felt not good enough, or if you have struggled to stick with your goals, this episode is for you. So be sure to subscribe and let's get into it. So, just to kind of get started off, I'm wondering if you can kind of tell us what you've been up to over the past decade and where life has taken you, what it's like being a mom, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, of course. I guess it's a decade. So I grew up doing a lot of acting, and that's something that I always thought I'd want to do as a career. And then moving to Utah was interesting because there's plenty of work here, but it's not necessarily enough to make it a full-time job, which is hard to do in any market, but especially here. And I had a degree in marketing. And so I jumped around a few jobs while trying to still be able to audition and do stuff on the side and professionally when I could. And then I had an opportunity to start my own business, which was very scary and still kind of is, and navigating all of that. But it did give me the flexibility to get to do more on the acting side too. And then I have two little kids. They're 7 and 4,
Oh my gosh.
and I know. And about 2.5 years ago, my husband and I decided with two of our other friends from film school to make a feature film. So about a year and a half ago, we shot that, and now we're in the process of trying to sell that too. So feels like there's just a lot of things in a lot of different directions. I have a lot of like identity crisis every day. But
Which
that's where I'm at.
character am I today?
I know. And I'm wearing these nerdy headphones because I can't find my AirPods. So I had to steal
Oh
these
no.
from my
Oh, that's okay.
husband.
That
So
was
sorry.
actually our look for a long time. We had the
Yeah.
big over the head headphones.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
I'm curious, where can I see any of your films? I haven't seen any of them.
So the only one, so we made the one, and it is not sold yet. So it's not,
Okay.
you had a bear in that, didn't you?
yeah, it was a little nuts.
What?
We bit off a little more than we could chew, and it's a good movie. But we learned a lot. I think it's cool in that way. I think that if we had taken on a smaller, easier project, we
Mm,
probably would have learned less, if that makes sense. Like it was
yeah.
kind of a roller coaster, and
So
it was really
why
great.
why this? Like why performing? Why production? A lot of people, I mean, a lot of people would look at that and they would say, wow, she's taking a really big risk. Why not get the quote unquote traditional job that in like these types of things? How do you overcome that when people kind of look at what you're attempting to do and they're like, oh, you're shooting for the stars there. That's too big of a dream.
I don't know. I'd like to say that I've overcome this, and I haven't completely, but I've worked on it. But I used to be really embarrassed to say that I was an actor. Like if I met somebody and they said, "What do you do?"
Mm,
I I didn't want to say that. Mostly, and this is so terrible, but mostly like when other people say that, I go, "Oh, that's cute." Like I have the same reaction that I am afraid of, which
mm,
is, rude. But when I was working full time and I could say like, "Oh, I'm an account manager at a PR firm," and even though like that didn't excite me,
Yeah.
I felt really good about saying that in
Yeah.
social situations or professional situations when I would
mm.
introduce myself. Feels easier. I feel like people respected me immediately for a job that kind of made sense and sounded boring. So I'm still a little bit overcoming that. But I think that it's just something that I couldn't ever stop thinking about. There were a
Mm.
couple of years before Avenue Q and then again after where I didn't do much. And then I'd go see a show or I'd go see something or I'd watch a new TV series that was great. And there'd be people in it that were like, I didn't know who they were. And I'd be
Mm.
like, they get to do that. Like, I want to do that. It still feels that way. Like, it's so hard and there's so much rejection, but like, there's so much good content out there. And
Mhm.
anytime I see
Yeah.
something, I'm like, why is that on Netflix? And why did that person get to go do that? And
Yeah.
so it is, and it's hard to stay motivated. And there are definitely days and weeks where I get really unmotivated. And then there are weeks that I get a ton done. And I feel
Mm.
like, there's always ups
Yeah.
and downs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially like when you see like those people and like their acting is terrible and you're like, well, damn, I could do that. Like I could
Yeah,
do better than that.
totally.
I
Yeah. And I'm sure you guys have both experienced that all the time too.
All the
yeah.
time. Every
Oh
time I
yes.
see Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm like, I'm better. I'm hotter.
No, it's mostly a lot of times with since we are in the language learning space, a lot of times we'll see these Instagram accounts with millions of followers and it's all AI
Yeah.
teaching incorrect things.
Yeah.
We're like, why?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then it's like that's the thing too, is it's really being a um someone who's I mean I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say like unsuccessful, but being like a person who's not like I don't make a living doing acting, right?
Right.
Um and so like I'm not a
Freelance.
name, I'm not recognizable, those things.
Hmm.
Like people the lack of respect as far as like wanting to hire professionals and pay them a good rate and stuff is so interesting
Mm.
because people are valued on either their name recognition that they can bring, eyeballs or more money to a project, or exactly what you're talking about, like the following on social media, which is just not something that was around
Yeah.
when I think, were young enough to
I'm 18. I don't
have
know what the hell you're talking
like
about.
stumbled into it, Like now
Yeah.
it's like I have to like work hard and like change my lifestyle in order to actively be a good influencer or social
Yeah.
media
Yeah. And
Mm.
presence
it's
person.
and I totally understand what you meant when you said like I felt kind of silly saying that I was an actor. It didn't feel it's almost like you knew they're not going to take me seriously.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I have to say I 100% agree because it's the same thing with being an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone thinks I
Uh,
sell Herbalife.
Everyone thinks that we're
Oh,
if
totally.
I just say I'm an entrepreneur, which is exactly what we are,
Yeah.
we're building something new, it's unique, you know. But there are stigmas around certain careers,
Yeah.
acting, art, and
Any
you
all
know,
art until somebody else tells them you're good. And by somebody else, I mean someone like respected in an
Yeah.
industry. Then
yeah,
yeah, people don't respect artists either.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like you have to meet a much higher expectation than any other career
Yeah.
when it comes to art or entrepreneurship,
hmm
if you want to be taken seriously. And
Yeah, and I've always said too, it's frustrating because I like part of my identity is being a good employee, whatever
Mm.
that means. So like being a good cast member or like in that way, or just like when I served at restaurants. Like
yeah.
I identify and I like thrive in situations where I can like prove myself and know that whoever's above me thinks I'm doing a good job.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And the frustrating thing about like entrepreneurship, acting, art is there's not that clear pathway to
Mm.
success either. And so
Hmm.
you can achieve something and it's just floats around in this silo. It doesn't necessarily lead to that next job or that next big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
you're
I
paving your own way.
if I
Yeah.
can ask actually, because you brought up a good point that it becomes a part of our identity. I'm a good cast
hmm
member. For some people, it's like, hey, I'm a good Christian. I'm a good artist. I'm a good whatever it may be.
Yeah.
When when you're not aligned with that, what can that do to your work, or what have you experienced that when you're not a quote unquote good employee, how does that
hmm
affect you, your motivation, everything like that?
Me personally, like I like having identities. And I think that that was the same thing with like the feeling more comfortable introducing myself when I had like a job title that was
Mm.
even generic, but that I was perceiving as being more respected.
Mm.
Hmm.
Um, because I've had stints where I was unemployed, like home with my kids. I was being like a stay-at-home mom, and that's not something I ever was that interested in. It didn't get
Hmm.
me that excited, and it does. It sort of feels uh not like because I don't want to say pointless, but like aimless. Like there's no clear direction
Yeah,
Where
to
do
you
I
go
can't
go
really
in.
from
move up a
here?
ladder
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just sort of like every day, it's like the things you're doing are just sort of like everyday tasks. And a lot of
Yeah.
times with motherhood or parenthood or things like that, it's like it's the same thing every day and you're just going to do it again
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Mm,
It's repetitive because
Yeah.
um your job doesn't get, I mean, your job changes as your kid gets older, of course.
Yeah.
You know, the homework that you're helping them with gets a
Yeah.
little
I can't even imagine.
harder.
You guys know that better than me. Real homework.
Yes. But it's definitely it's how many times can I do the laundry?
Yeah.
How many times can I change a diaper? It's
mm,
there's not and I want to preface this to anybody listening. This being a mother or being a parent is such an important thing. We are
Absolutely.
not taking away from the importance of being a parent.
Mm-mm.
Um, but I understand when it comes to ambition in what you want to do with your life, it's okay if
Yeah.
you want to do something more, something different, because you can still be a great parent.
Absolutely. And I think that there was a lot of like imposter syndrome with me too, staying
mm.
home with my kids because like my sister-in-law is a stay-at-home mom and she is so fulfilled by that. And so then it's like you also like have to reflect back in like, well, is something wrong with me that I can't
Yeah.
be satisfied
Mhm.
doing this?
Why am I not feeling the warm
Yeah,
fuzzies inside about this? Why am I not being fulfilled in the same way that she can or he can, right?
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
Mm.
I yeah, and because different paths for everybody, different passions for everybody.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I totally
Um,
feel it.
I do have a question because I'm noticing a pattern of comparison, and we were actually talking about this right before you came in, Jesse and Yo-Yo, feeling a lack of motivation because of that comparison. In your mind, who do you compare yourself to the most and why?
Um, I would say as I continue to work in film and TV, I've met a lot of exciting people and really great people and people I would have perceived if I didn't know them personally to be really successful.
Hmm.
And so now I'm like following a lot of people on Instagram who I was in the film with or did a short with. And so I do and then other actors that I've worked with here in Utah too. I find myself, you know, they'll post something exciting and it's so fun to like lift each other up and be so happy for peers.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see that and be like, oh, they're at Sundance with a film that they're in, and that's so cool
Mm.
and want to be there too. Or they're on set today, like somebody's posting
Hmm.
that they're on set. But then you get kind of a reality check because I try to post more things about work for the same reason, like to stay relevant or to whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'll run into people who are like, "Oh my gosh, you have been so busy." And I can see in their eyes how I feel about other people.
Mm.
Mm.
And I go, "You know it's not.
Yeah.
It's not as good as it looks, you know, it's not
Right.
as frequent as it looks." So it's like,
I
you know,
have
I've posted
successfully tricked you.
yeah. Like I've posted a few times about a short film that I did that's been in a couple festivals. Nothing super exciting or impressive, but
Mm.
it's the same you know, I was working for 3 days. That was a 3 day job. I got paid for 3 days of work. And it's
Hmm.
exciting that it's in festivals, but it makes it seem like
It's
I'm
bigger
doing
than,
more. Yeah,
yeah.
and that it's bigger than it is.
Yeah.
And it's still exciting and it's fun to celebrate. But yeah, I see that and I try to remind myself too it it looks a lot better or
Mhm.
they probably aren't as busy as I think they are.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
they're probably thinking the same thing about someone else. You know,
Yeah.
everybody has someone else in front of them that's doing it more or better than they are. So they think.
Right.
100%. And that's just it. Like we were again, we were discussing. It's like you were reading our minds before you came in. We were just discussing I am going to probably quote this horribly, but we were just talking about a quote that was never compare your first chapter to someone else's chapter 10.
Totally. I love that.
And like I said, I don't know who said it. I don't know how accurate I am with the words, but the vibe is the vibe. It's the
Yeah.
same thing, you know? And sometimes we catch ourselves downplaying our own achievements. And even if somebody sees you doing something great, you're like, no, but
Hmm.
it's not actually really that great. I just made you think it was,
Totally.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh, that's
And that's
funny.
what everybody's doing.
Hmm.
when it comes
Yeah, and
to
sometimes I'm like envious of there are a few people in like the network of actors in Utah that are really good at self-promotion in a really beautiful and like humble way. And then there
Mhm.
are some people who I'm so envious of the confidence that it takes
Mm.
to promote themselves so much, but at the same time, like I would never I wouldn't want to go that far.
Yeah.
I want you to know that you are somebody else's chapter 10, by the way.
And that's something that everybody is too. And that's hard. And so that was a nice reminder. Like when I ran into a friend, it was like, you are just doing so much. And I was like,
Mm.
oh,
That actually is kind of something to think about. Like, for example, Yo-Yo, she's always comparing herself. She's a little bit worried about like art with Jesse. She leads prayer groups and she was really nervous about that. But we've never stopped to think like, well, what about the little starting artist who's looking at Yo-Yo and being like, God, I wish I had her courage. I really want that. Or the girl or the guy who's sitting in the audience listening to Jesse give a prayer saying like, wow, I really
I
wish
want
that I
I
could
want to
do
talk
that.
like that. I
yeah,
wish I could talk like that.
And we don't realize that we are the level 10 to another person.
Hmm.
absolutely. Yeah,
I
Um,
love.
I
I love
actually
that.
I did want to kind of dive into um the resilience aspect of it because obviously you're in a field where God, you won't get rewards for a film for years,
Hmm.
right? So you're dumping a
Yeah,
bunch of money in, you won't see a profit if at all for at least a
yeah,
couple years. Your
There's no instant gratification.
yeah,
no. I mean, it was really fun to do. Like
Yeah,
the experience was great, but yes, it's very scary.
the
uh,
ROI or return on of
Yeah,
investment is it's long term.
yes.
yes,
We also like from the experience of auditions, constant rejection, promotion, hell, you could just be wearing the wrong shirt and it's like, wow, you dumb bitch. Like, why are you wearing that, in your film? Whatever it may be. So you're
yeah.
constantly going through a lot of poo-poo in order to get to where you want to be. How
Hmm.
how do you stay resilient on that? How do you keep yourself going even in the shittiest of weeks?
It definitely doesn't always work. And there are times when I'm just like, I'm not going to do anything this week. Like, I'm not going to audition, or like I'll get audition requests for something. And I've made it a resolution this year that I'm just going to do them all. And I've
Mhm.
already said no to two, but I'm doing my best. I'm going to do them all. And a lot of it is just like out of self-doubt. So if
Mhm.
it's something cool that comes across my inbox, right, I'll do it for sure. Anything film, anything TV series, but like anything else that I know if I get it and I go, I'm going to have a good experience. I'm going to meet people. It could lead to something else. Like it's so silly
Yeah.
to prejudge and pass up or on an opportunity because most of the fun things I've done have come directly to me from people I've worked with
Hmm.
before,
Oh yeah,
not
your
necessarily
network.
something that's like the cold audition.
Mm.
Um,
They say your
but yeah,
network is your net worth.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I'm so bad at like cold networking. Like I would hate to go to like a mingle or,
Yes.
because I'm like, they only want to tell me what they're doing. They don't want to listen to what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Well,
Yes.
And I wish I was better at that.
And I want to actually point that out to our clients and our listeners what Lauren just said there. Um, I go there and they have no interest in me, right? As we've preached over and over and over again, the best way to become the most interesting person is to be the most interested person and to
Mhm.
genuinely get to know the people around you and to build that network.
those are
Um,
the people you remember when you network, or the people who wanted to know the most about you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you're willing to, like, of course, if this is too much, you definitely don't have to answer this, but I am kind of curious, what are the worst thoughts you've ever had about yourself or your work, and what made you realize that those thoughts were false?
I think I probably have bad thoughts all the time, just by nature of, you kind of put yourself out there, like you mentioned, like so much, and there's a bunch of rejection. And what it used to make me feel better if I didn't get something, especially in Utah, 'cause it's such a small group, is if I knew who got it and if the person who got it was really different from me in any aspect. And that always made me feel better. Like, well, I'm never going to be that person. And then every once in a while it'll be somebody really similar, and then I'm like, oh, well, then that was just on me,
Yeah.
which is never true. um what helped me overcome, I mean, I there's all kinds of, like, I've always thought I'm not pretty enough to be the leading love interest,
Mm,
but I'm not quirky or charactery enough to be like their friend. And so, like, in my
Mm.
brain, in like a regular movie sort of formula, for years and years, I always felt like I didn't have a place. And that was
Mm.
something I was putting on myself instead of just being like, I can come in with whoever I've decided I'm going to be today, and they don't know me personally.
mm,
They
Yeah.
don't know my insecurities. They don't know what I looked like when I was 15, that
Hmm.
right? Like, it's what I'm bringing to the table.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have a lot of that. I'm shorter, which I always thought, like, nobody sees how, I mean, especially now with self-tapes, no one's seeing really how tall you are. And there's so many actors who then all of a sudden you meet them in real life and you're like, oh, you're the same height as me.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think with acting stuff, a lot of physical insecurities come into play.
hmm
And then if that's not it, then it's talent. And something that, kind of touching on what we were talking about earlier, Taylor, about like entrepreneurship and art and acting
Hmm.
being so different from just kind of these traditional jobs. I think
Yeah.
it's sort of frowned upon to, if you have something considered a talent, even
Mm,
Yeah.
if it's something you worked really hard on and went to school for and went to and honed your skills, it's
Hmm.
still considered a talent. And so you're not allowed to think you're good at it.
Yeah.
right.
I
It's
think
you're
Um,
not humble. You're
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so then that's
you can't say
interesting
that you're good at your
because
job because that's bragging about your abilities,
sure, but like,
right?
you could be a really good lawyer. And I don't know
Exactly.
that I would get like turned off by somebody being like, oh, I'm a really good lawyer.
Oh
Or
no, they were
maybe,
Right.
confident. You
yeah,
want to pay them to be your lawyer. But if you're like,
yeah,
oh no, I'm a great actor.
yeah,
I feel like especially for women that they're caught in like between a rock and a hard place because just like right there, if you were to say like, "Oh, I'm too ugly for a role," it's like, "Oh, Lauren, you need to have more confidence in yourself. That's your problem. It's the confidence." But if you were to arrive with that confidence and say, "I'm beautiful," I'd be like, "Fuck, she needs to get off her high horse. Needs to."
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like there's no winning.
Yeah.
Um, and something that I heard a long time ago, and then I'll tell you after that how this like got reconfirmed to me making the film. But something that someone told me a long time ago is, and I think that this works for entrepreneurship too, a little bit, like you can kind of make this work for anything,
Hmm.
is an audition is you providing them with a potential answer. So,
Mm.
like,
Mm,
if you think about, they have a problem, they need to cast whatever they're doing, and they're hoping to not be disappointed at the end of the day by watching all of the auditions and not like finding someone.
mm,
And
Yeah.
so you're just there to provide yourself as an option and hopefully be the solution to their problem.
Yeah.
mm.
So,
Absolutely.
because I think I always, used to go into auditions as, I have a problem. My problem is I need this job. I want
Yeah.
this job. I'm desperate for this job, as opposed to like, they're a little desperate, and to like flip the script a little bit and be like, I'm
Mm.
here. Here's my solution to your problem.
They're begging for a new employee.
Yes. And
Yes.
I'm
it's
just
like,
showing them that I'm the answer to their problem.
yeah, here's option four.
Hi,
It's
I'm
me.
solution.
And exactly. And it come at it that way does help with the confidence in a way that isn't like, I'm incredible.
Yeah.
It's, hey, I've done some work on this. Let me know if this is what you want.
Mm.
I can
I love
I
that.
can I can I can solve your problems,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
And then it's a confidence, but it's not necessarily like what you're talking about, Jeremy, like a cockiness or a
Mm.
yeah.
conceitedness, as much as like, I've done this work here, maybe it'll help.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Being that it is a more male-dominated industry, I'm kind of curious how that plays in. Like when it comes to, because I mean, I've never experienced it as a woman, in the acting industry, things like that. But I have heard some horror stories of exploitation, not being taken seriously after having a baby, just in general being looked down upon in the industry. How do you overcome these types of things?
I think it's different, not necessarily better or worse, but I think it's different as an actor than it is as like a woman in other workplaces
Hmm.
or in positive ways and in negative ways.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that not that many people care that I have kids. Um, but that usually doesn't come up,
Mm,
until later. And so you show up to an audition under the pretense that you're available
mm,
for the shoot and you understand that if you get cast, you're going to need to be in this state for a month or you're
mm.
gonna it's 12-hour days and like so you're kind of agreeing to that ahead of time. It's like showing up, right? Like you know what the rehearsal schedule is and you have to say your conflicts ahead of time. And
Right.
so whether or not you have kids doesn't totally matter to them at that point because
Yeah.
you're saying you're available.
Hmm.
um but I did find when making the film and being on like a producer, like having a producer hat on too,
Mm,
and making a film that I was going to be in, that was an interesting journey a little bit. Like we bought the script and even the screenwriters were like, "Oh, I'm sure Lauren's great, but you probably should have her play a smaller role and you can get
Hmm.
somebody bigger in that part." And
Yeah.
that happened a lot. And
Mm.
mm. So like for
and a lot
your
of it
if I'm understanding your own show, the show you wrote and people were
I didn't
like,
write it.
"Oh,
I didn't
okay."
write it, but we bought the script, but we paid, you know what I mean? We paid for it. Once you option it, unless there's stuff in the contract, like we have creative license with
Hmm.
the script. And then we even like we hired some casting directors who then quit once they found out that that I was going to play the main part, which just kind of it was such a bummer to me because there's so many parts in the film.
Mhm.
There's like 15 main parts.
Now, if
Like
you took all of those parts, I could
good parts.
understand.
Yeah. And right. And I was even hesitant. Like I loved the movie and when we did it, and then it was like I said, we did it with my husband and then another couple that we met in college in film school.
Yeah.
And the other guy was directed it, is the director.
Mm.
And whether or not I mean, I think he was genuine, but he was like, no, I totally picture you in this. And they were really great about having my back the whole time.
Hmm.
But we would get people who were like, well, you're really taking a risk because you're an unknown and this part is really great. Like we could probably get somebody interested in this part who is somebody, right? And
Mm,
that's going to elevate your film and that's going to allow more somebodies to want to do it. And we could surround you as a smaller character with a bunch of famous people, and that could be really good for your career. And
mm,
it was
Yeah.
like, no one was saying that to the director, who is a male who he never directed a feature.
right.
It was his first time. If he was a notable director, surely we'd be able to get bigger actors,
Exactly. Like if we just get
so
a
it was,
better director, then we'll have a better turnout of actors.
yeah. And
Mhm.
what was really irritating was it came a lot from other women, which I was just like bummed out about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I was really self-conscious about it for the first like 2 or 3 months of working like pre-production on the film to the point where I was like, you guys, totally up to you. Like, I don't have to do this part. Like, and then I was like mad at myself
Mm,
because why wouldn't I? Like, that makes no sense. The four of us came together to make a movie, and that's my skills that I bring to the table. Like,
yeah.
why would I not do that? And so it worked. I found some confidence there, and I just kind of had to push all of that aside because, to your point, then later on, I had to do the movie.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
last thing I wanted the whole time was think, like, oh my gosh, everybody already preemptively regrets me being in it. And
Right.
so it really was important to like push that aside and find the confidence and in my position.
Yeah. And I am curious like what the big goal is. Like I mean obviously like lots of money, lots of time, lots of
Hmm.
rejection, lots of stress in internal conflict.
Yeah.
Why? Why?
Like my personal goal as an actor.
Like
Okay.
what are you trying to achieve or what makes all of this like all the negatives worth it in the end to you?
It's interesting because I think, like I've always said, I'd love to work enough that people are like, oh my gosh, you're that girl from that one thing. Like,
Mhm.
not famous, not a name, not anybody who cares what I wear to
Yeah.
grocery store, whatever, right? But just like, oh, she was in that one thing. Like if I'm in
Recognition.
something,
Yeah.
oh, I liked you in that. But it's funny because I'm reframing that while we're talking, and that still is about like other people
Mm,
Mm,
and
that
a level of
external
like
validation.
recognition. Yeah.
Mhm.
Where I we did the film, we shot the film last August, so almost a year and a half ago now. And the 20 days that we were making the film were so fun.
mm,
And all the time leading up to that, planning it was so fun. And so like that gratification of like doing it
mm,
was really great. It's been stressful since because now we have to try and sell it, and that's going to determine if we personally can like make more.
mm,
Um, but trying to remember that like I enjoy the days that I'm on set,
Yeah.
or like, I mean, Avenue Q, I did a play a couple years ago.
Mhm.
mm,
But like Avenue Q was the last thing I did before that on stage.
yeah.
And it's like there's just nothing like that.
Yeah. It sounds
And
like it's that fulfillment that you strived for before when you were at home.
yeah, exactly. And so to frame that instead of because again, like when you introduce yourself, people always want to be like, well, what have I seen you in? And it's like nothing. If you caught the RC Willie commercial that played during March Madness 8 years ago, that was cool.
That was cool. I
But like nothing, like you haven't seen me in anything.
I
Um,
I absolutely love it. I think that it's I actually do still remember oh gosh, it was during Avenue Q. I remember when I was it like Jake Holt's party or something like that. I can't even remember, but we were at some sort of event or cast party or something like that. And I remember meeting your husband there and you guys told me like we're thinking of starting a production company. I
mhm.
was like, that's pretty cool. Like, I think that sounds cool. I like to see you here. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm just so proud of her. Like,
Yeah.
really sticking with it for
That's
several
very cool.
years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's scary. Like I guess he comes from a position in a world where like he can invest stuff
Hmm.
and has advisors and we're like doing what people tell us is the smart thing to do. And you go and you sit in boring meetings and it's like, he's investing in other people's stuff that
Yeah.
someone has told him, oh, this is good for this because of X, Y, and Z. And then finally it was like we're taking these risks. Nothing's not risky. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
we invest in what we do and what we want to do? So it's definitely scary.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but like if you take a step back, it's not any less risky
Yeah.
Yeah.
or any more risky than doing anything else in
Mhm.
that same vein. So
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that like every one of the biggest things that like everyone gives me as a con or like even a pro of like entrepreneurship versus a job, right? Because
yeah,
I worked in the tech industry for 10 years. I was traveling consistently and everything, but I've never found fulfillment, right? I've always wanted to work with people and to help them get out of their situations. That's one of the reasons I liked working in tech because it acted as a solution for people.
sure.
Um, but one of the things that I found was that I still didn't feel that fulfillment. And when we went out on our own, that's when people started hitting us, well, what about job security?
Yeah.
And, I think that COVID-19 proved that that's a myth. It's as soon
Hmm.
as something goes down, your job is just as easy to lose as something I'm creating and something that I'm building.
Job
Um,
Yeah,
security is an illusion.
yeah. The
absolutely.
The only difference is that when I'm suffering and working hard for what I want, I'm working on my goals. When I'm suffering and working to be like a tax accountant or something, I'm
Sure.
building someone else's dream. And
And I think it's interesting to like reflect back on like I have a really great group of girlfriends and a lot of them do really like badass things. Like
mm,
and so when I think about my friends, I'm like, gosh, I have a friend who's like this really cool, she's a lawyer, but she represents kids in the foster care system. Um, and I have, like just my friends, a lot and they're most of them have traditional jobs.
yeah,
And it's funny to hear them say like, well, when I talk about my friends' jobs, you're the first person I think of. Where
Mm,
like, it's kind of like opposites,
yeah.
grass is always greener. Because in my mind, I'm like, God, they're crazy smart. And like my one friend is an app developer, and gosh, how smart does she have to be that? Or like
That's
whatever
my
I talk
sister
about.
and I. We're
Yeah.
jealous of
And
each
then my
other.
friends are like, my friend made a movie.
Mm,
And you know what I mean? Or like I saw her in a play a couple months or years ago. And like that's what they would say
Mhm.
as like an exciting thing. And I just, you never see yourself the same way other people see you.
I like that. Becoming more aware of like how others see you. We wanted to turn over to allow our clients to kind of ask you some personal questions that may
Yeah.
have bubbled up. But before we do, I am curious if there was a specific quote or anything that keeps you going or anything that kind of resonates with you during a lot whenever you're in your lowest moment.
Sure. I mean, my dad used to say this all the time, and I actually think I found out later it's like an AA mantra.
Yeah.
But what other people think of you is none of your business is something that my dad told me all the time, especially growing up and middle age or middle school girls and all of that. Like it was something that always rung true to me and made sense. And I think that in an industry where what other people think of me is integral to
Yeah.
Yeah.
whether or not I'm going to get work.
Mhm.
It's hard to remind yourself of that, but
Yeah.
that it's still true. And
Yeah.
to circle back real quick on, so when we were casting the film, I got to see so many audition tapes, and like the casting directors would narrow it down and we'd see like their top picks. And there
Mhm.
were so many people for the same role who were incredible. And you're picking people for really arbitrary reasons at
Yeah.
that point because everyone's good. And so
This one
it's just,
feels right.
yeah,
Hmm.
This one, yeah.
She was
yeah, and it doesn't
taller,
make any
whatever it may be.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then it was like, how many, like, it's funny because it was kind of like this. We'd have like all the videos up. It would almost look like a Zoom screen and you could kind of watch them. And it's like, how many final boards of like six have I been on?
Hmm.
I'll
Yeah.
never know because you don't ever find out that you were almost cast
Yeah.
as something. But I was just like, all of those people were great. You don't look at someone's video 10 times
Yeah.
and just because you thought they were terrible. And so like
Yes.
Yeah.
that was a cool way to think, like I might not have booked it, but I bet, even if it's not true, right, I bet I was
Yeah.
up there. I bet I was on that screen and those people know my face, and next time maybe we'll remember and it'll be
Yeah.
like
Absolutely.
my turn.
Yeah.
I like
And I
that.
and I think sometimes I need to remind myself, and I think a lot of people need to remind themselves if they, especially if you are um in an industry that isn't always taken seriously,
Hmm.
that people will always, and I want to end on this, that people will always project their own fears onto you.
Mm.
So if it doesn't make sense for them in their own life, they will assume it won't work out for you.
Yeah.
And so a lot of
Yeah.
people who are well-intentioned, they are going to try to protect you from your dreams
Yeah.
because they're afraid of them.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's a good reminder sometimes.
Absolutely.
That was, in my opinion, a very powerful conversation. And one of my key takeaways was that we never know who might be looking up to us, right? And so we owe it to those who are looking up to us to keep going. So that way we can inspire them to continue and continue to inspire others that follow them. But we want to hear your thoughts. Be sure to comment. And if you do have questions or want to level up your English, be sure to book a free call with us. Bye.